Hi guys, today I want to talk to you about food motivation and dogs who maybe sometimes don't take food around distractions. Now, we are of course in the middle of our free 4-part workshop on focus building and working around distractions. And on Sunday night when we did workshop part 2, PS the replay is live now and so you can catch that. We had questions about dogs who won't take food in the presence of distractions. Dogs who excuse me, dogs who are spitting out treats when there are distractions around. And so we had lots of questions regarding that. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to jump on here today and I wanted to kind of cover some tips for food motivation and give you kind of my take on that problem. Now, before we get started, or I should say before I get into the teaching, I want to take a minute to say I have been there. I have done this with dogs. So okay, let's do this now. After we had all these questions on our live on Sunday about food motivation around distractions, I wanted to know how many people were struggling with this problem. So inside our Facebook group, I asked you guys. I asked whether your dog fell into the category of, will super food motivated, takes food anytime, any place, no matter what, or is kind of averagely food motivated, meaning he's mostly food motivated, but it kind of depends on different factors. Or if your dog was a picky eater, if you had trouble getting your dog to eat food in the presence of distractions or maybe eat food at all, maybe your dog isn't terribly food motivated. And what I found when I did that poll is a lot of you struggle with this. So we have a lot of, solidly average dogs in the group, dogs who are mostly pretty good about taking treats when we offer them. They're mostly pretty food motivated, but sometimes we struggle with it. And then lots of dogs who the owners said their dogs are definitely in that third category, that picky eater category, where it's hard to get them to take food in the presence of distractions. So when we train our service dogs, ideally, in a perfect world, we really want to find those kind of unicorn dogs who will take food all the time, no matter what, no questions asked. Because these are the dogs that are kind of like hyper food motivated. Like they act like they're starving all the time, even though they are super healthy and they're not starving and they're at a good weight and all that stuff. If you're lucky enough to have one of those dogs, know that you're very lucky. Leo is like that, and I am very lucky to have him that way. One of my personal dogs is like that, and I am very lucky to have that. But most of our service dogs in training are averagely food motivated, meaning most of the time they're pretty good about taking treats, but sometimes, it depends on what's going on around them, or even dogs who are not food motivated kind of at all. So what I wanted to take a minute was to address that. Now, I have worked with dogs of all of these categories. Like I said, Leo, who is my first service dog I have worked with, who falls into that unbelievably food motivated category, all the way to dogs who fall into that last category who are not food motivated kind of like at all. So if you're watching, let me know which category your dog falls into. Do you have a dog who's super food motivated, kind of averagely food motivated, or kind of a sort of picky-ish eater who's maybe more difficult to motivate with food? Now, when I, a few years ago, or it's going to be a couple years ago now, I worked with a dog named Coda, and some of you guys are going to have heard me talk about Coda before. Because when he came to me, he was extremely picky with his food. He would not take food in the presence of people. So people were his biggest distraction. He wanted to go say hi to all the people all the time, no matter what. He was super unbelievably social. And if there was a stranger present, no matter how far away, he would not take food. I could have leftover steak, I could have leftover chicken, I could have anything. And if there was a stranger nearby, Coda was not going to take that food. Okay? And by the time that his training was finished, he was taking just dog food even in Walmart. He would accept dog food as a reinforcement even in Walmart. So I have been there and I've gone through this training process. So one of the problems we can have when we start to use labels like my dog isn't food motivated or my dog is food motivated is that it puts that label on it and it makes us feel as though that's not changeable. Okay, but the thing about food motivation, a dog who eats treats whenever we offer the treat, that's just a behavior, and behavior is changeable. So even if you have a dog who's not food motivated, we can change that. We can fix that. Okay, so what I want to do today is give you some of these tips. I want to talk to you about how to increase food motivation in your service dogs. So the first one, I have a few kind of quick tips, and then I have a few more like in-depth tips, if that kind of makes sense. Now, the first thing whenever we talk about food motivation is I want to make sure that you are not free feeding your dog. So do not free feed your dog. What I mean by free feed is leave food out all day long for your dog to eat. Now, most owner trainers I work with are not doing this, but it is something to cover. If you are free feeding your dog, if you're leaving food out for him all day long, and you're struggling with food motivation, the first thing you want to do is stop doing that. You want to go back to 2 meals a day or however many meals a day your vet has you feeding your dog, given your dog's age and health and all of that stuff. So my first tip there was do not free feed your dog. Even if you're not struggling with food motivation, I would highly recommend that you do not free feed your dog. And what I mean by that is leave food out all day long for him to eat. Because if he can have it just for free, if it's just laying around all day, it's not something he ever has to work for, and it can really screw up our food motivation. Now, the second tip is, of course, going to be make sure your dog is at a good weight. Make sure that he's at a healthy weight. When I was working with pet dogs a lot, I find this less often with owner trainers and service dogs, but I do find it some. When I was working with pet dogs a lot, I found a direct correlation between a dog's weight and his interest in eating food. If the dog was overweight, he was less likely to be interested in food as a reinforcer for training. And with pet dogs, being overweight is a huge problem. There are a lot of very overweight pet dogs on the planet. So if you have a service dog in training and you're having trouble with some food motivation, one of the things you really want to make sure is that your dog is at a healthy weight. And this is something you can talk to your vet about, but you want to be able to easily feel their rib cage, easily feel their spine, stuff like that. There are a lot of really great graphics online that will help you determine if your dog is at a good weight and stuff like that. But definitely just check that one off the list. You're not free feeding and your dog is at a good weight, because if you're leaving food out all day long and your dog is overweight, we are going to struggle with food motivation. So those are the first two things. Now, the second two things, once you've determined that you're not free feeding your dog and your dog is at a good weight, is to implement a work to eat program. Now, this is where we talk about having our dogs make sure that they're earning all their food. And you're going to have heard me talk about this. You're going to have heard other trainers talk about this. We want our dogs to kind of earn their food throughout the day. Now, this does not mean we're starving our dogs so that they're super hungry and, any dog who's super hungry is going to be interested in his food. But what this means is just that when your dog gets his meals, you're not giving that to him out of a bowl. So instead of putting it in a bowl for your dog to eat, do a training session, put it in a Kong wobbler, do a game like Cardboard Mountain or Scatter Feed, or put it in a one of those scatter mats, a snuffle mat, that's the word, something where your dog has to work to eat. Because one of the things I have found with a lot of dogs who aren't interested in food is they just don't understand that they need to work to make the food happen. So a healthy animal is he's going to behave to make food appear. Healthy canines of all species in the wild and in captivity have to do something to make the food appear. They have to hunt for it, they have to scavenge for it, something like that. So we want to kind of reinstall that in an appropriate way in our service dogs so that they have to do something to make the food appear. They have to bat the Kong wobbler around, they have to hunt it out in the snuffle mat, they have to learn a trick and then they get to have their food. We want to have some kind of work to eat program going on. And these are the first three things that we're really going to look at. We're going to make sure you're not free feeding, your dog is at a good weight, and that you have installed some type of work to eat program before we look at anything else regarding food motivation. Now, with Coda, when he first came to me, this was the first thing that we had to do. Coda came to me, and when you put his food bowl in front of him, he wouldn't eat it. He just went, I don't really want that, I'll come back later. He was one of those typical dogs that everybody would look at and say, he's just not very food motivated. He's just not a dog who's interested in food. But I need him to be interested in food because he was a service dog in training. And because I think that healthy dogs who are behaviorally healthy are interested in working for their food. So once we kind of implemented those three things, we stopped the free feeding, we made sure his weight was healthy, and we implemented a work to eat program, then we started looking at the training aspects. Now, the training aspects of working or eating food around treats, eating food around distractions is going to be a couple of things. Now, in our workshop on Sunday, we talked about balancing the teeter-totter, and this is going to be my first big tip for you. Now, if you haven't seen the workshop replay from Sunday evening, you're going to want to watch that because it's only going to be up for the next couple weeks. I think it comes down on October 30th. So if you haven't seen, we're right in the middle of this 4-part focus building workshop. And if you haven't seen those yet, you're going to want to watch those and take advantage of those, because I talked a lot about balancing the teeter-totter in that workshop video. Now, what I mean by balancing the teeter-totter is when I think about it this way. When we're training our dogs, we want to keep our teeter-totter nice and level, right? So I want my teeter-totter nice and level. So when my distractions get heavy and they start to tip my teeter-totter in one direction, I need to do something to offset that, okay? I need to put something on the other side to offset my teeter-totter and make it balanced again, so that my dog can be successful around the distractions. So if my distractions get heavy, I need to put something on the other side of my teeter-totter to make it balance it back out. Now, I can balance it back out with something like better treats. That's a really good way to balance my teeter-totter out. So when I get distractions, I need to increase the value of the treat that I'm using. So with dogs, the dogs that I work with, Leo being my first exception ever, we work for dog food in the house. If we're in the house or in my training building and there are no other dogs or people around, we train for dog food. There are no distractions. My teeter-totter is very easy to keep balanced in my living room or in my training building. The moment we have distractions, like we leave the property or I have a group class going on in my training facility or something, my teeter-totter starts to do this, okay? And if I want to balance it back out, I need to do something. So I can do something like put better treats on the other side of my teeter-totter. So at home, I use dog food. When we go out into public, I tend to use like the Bravo dehydrated dog treats, but you can also use homemade dog treats. I used to use a lot of the Fresh Pet, which is like a refrigerated dog food, something like leftover chicken, something like boiled chicken breast, hot dogs, something really yummy that balances that teeter-totter back out. This is really, really important if we want to get our dog to work around distractions. Now, most dogs need help with this balancing of the teeter-totter. Leo is an exception. So some people who posted or commented on my post where I was asking you how food motivated your dog is, some of you said that your dogs are always food motivated no matter what. But that is the exception. That is not the rule. Most dogs need us to balance that teeter-totter out. So the distractions start to get heavy, and I can do something like use really good treats to help balance it back out. And when my teeter-totter is balanced, that's when I have a dog who can focus on me and do his behaviors and all that stuff. The other thing that I might do is use a higher rate of reinforcement. So I might reinforce the dog more often and balance my teeter-totter back out that way. I also might do something like lower my criteria so that my dog doesn't have to, for example, when Kenzie, my retriever, is at home and we're practicing heeling, I expect her to heel in a almost perfect heel position for 10 to 20 steps before I click and treat. That's the criteria that I have right now because she's really good at it. I want her in that perfect heel position. When we go out and train in public, she doesn't have a ton of public access experience yet, so I lower my criteria. I will still reinforce her as long as she's in sort of within a couple feet of me, even if it's not a perfect heel position. And I also click and treat every couple of steps in public right now instead of waiting 10 to 20 steps. Now, here's an example of balancing the teeter-totter. Now, this is Coda, and this is the doodle I've been talking about at the beginning of this live, who I talk about a lot, when we first started training him, he would not take food around people, ever. He also would not eat. He wouldn't work for low-value treats ever either. He had to work. It always had to be hot dogs, and there had to be no people around. That was the only way to get this dog to focus. So this is a video of him in Walmart, sort of midway through his training. So what I want you to see here is how his trainer, his handler, is giving him quite a few clicks and treats per minute. So she's reinforcing him quite often for staying in this down stay as maybe if I move me over here, you'll be able to see a little better, while these people go past him. So she had a teeter-totter. She wanted to keep it nice and balanced. So in order to balance it out, she's using a high rate of reinforcement. She's clicking and treating often to help keep Coda in this downstay position so that he can be successful and we can have a nice balanced teeter-totter. Now, this was about midway through his training, and find where I'm going. There we go. This was about midway through his training that video took place. So of course, when he was more advanced, he didn't need so many treats per minute to keep that teeter-totter balanced. And that's the thing about dog training, is if we do it right, in the beginning of training, I have to put a lot of stuff on this side to keep my teeter-totter balanced. We have a distraction and it feels like I have to put a whole bunch of pressure to get it to stay balanced. I have to use really good treats and I have to treat really, really often. But as our dogs become more experienced, it doesn't stay that way. It becomes easier over time to keep that teeter-totter nice and balanced. So in the beginning with Coda, this was about midway through his training. I'll just play this again for you. About midway through his training, he needed this kind of high level of reinforcement, where he was being reinforced very often for maintaining a downstay in the presence of these strangers. As he became more advanced, he did not need so many clicks and treats per minute. Okay, and there's a process that we go through to help our dogs go from what you're seeing now to getting very few treats in public. There's a process for fading that treats out. And I see a lot of people try to fade the treats out too quickly. So that's something that I'm always helping my students with in the academy, is how do we fade the treats out? How do we, we can't fade the treats out until we have the behavior we want. So my point is, I'm getting a little rambly at you. My point is, there is a process to go from here to the point where Coda didn't need any treats for being in public. There is a training process for that we have to go through. And that's something that I help students with inside the academy. All right, I've got a couple more tips for you. Now, the next one is going to be train it. And this sounds really simple. And this is something we go pretty in depth with in my academy as well. So when I tell people, what I said at the beginning of this live is I told you that taking treats in public is a behavior. And it is a behavior that we can teach. So even if we have a dog who is like Coda, who comes to us very uninterested in food, very like, meh, I don't want that. I would rather go say hi to the people. We can actually go through a training process to teach our dogs to take food in the presence of distractions. And this is something that we go with pretty in depth in the academy as well, because we're trying to always create new reinforcers. We're trying to make sure that our dogs work for food reinforcers, for toy reinforcers, and even eventually when we don't have any reinforcer at all. But you can teach it. So what I want you to do is, if you're struggling with food motivation in your dog, I want you to think about teaching it like any other behavior. It's my absolute favorite topic that we teach inside the academy. I think I have a lot of favorite topics. It's one of my favorite topics that we teach inside the academy. But a little tip to get you started is think about it like a behavior. So just like any other cue and any other behavior, there's a few pieces here. First, we want to set our dogs up to succeed. So if your dog isn't going to take food in a certain environment, I wouldn't put him in that environment until he's ready. We're going to practice the food eating behavior at home until the food eating behavior is perfect. Then we're going to practice the food eating behavior in the front yard and the backyard and at the park. And we're going to practice that food eating behavior in new environments around distractions. So in Sunday's live workshop, we talked about how to systematically introduce distractions to our dogs, how to systematically introduce distractions to teach our dogs to work around focus. So there's a lot of stuff in that free workshop video that you can use when it comes to teaching your dog to take food in the presence of distractions. And then my last tip for you is going to be make it an event. So in this picture, I clicked the clicker and then I kind of moved around. So some dogs really want the reinforcement to be like an event. They want that reinforcement procedure to be more than just, oh, here's your treat. Okay, so there's a difference between me clicking. I've got my headphones in today, I can't back up. There's a difference between me clicking and handing my dog a treat, which is enough for a lot of dogs, and that clean mechanics is really important. But some dogs, there's a difference between me going click, treat, and me going click, oh, I bet I've got a really good treat for you in my pocket. Oh, there it is. Do you want this tripe? This is delicious. Those are two different things. Some dogs find it really exciting when I click and then run away and then deliver the treat. So we want to try to make our treat delivery an event. So that whole reinforcement process, we can think about it like a reinforcement process, not just a treat. There's a process there. There's an event there. Some dogs like it if we toss the treat so they can catch it. I have a couple personal dogs who, when the distractions start to get heavier and I start to tilt my teeter-totter, one of the really easy ways for me to tilt it back in my direction is to just start tossing the treat. So instead of handing it to her, I click and I toss it, and then she can catch it. And she really enjoys that catching. It's kind of like a game for her. So that's a really easy way for me to even out the teeter-totter with that dog, is to click and then toss the treat instead of hand it to her. So you want to make it an event. And every dog is going to see their reinforcement process as they're going to enjoy slightly different things. So every dog is a little bit different there. So as I've talked about before, it's really important that you understand what motivates your dog, because some dogs really enjoy movement when we run around with them. Some dogs really enjoy praise when we tell them how great they are and how wonderful they are. Some dogs hate that. I have a dog who hates that. Some dogs really enjoy when we toss treats so that they can catch it. Some dogs, we really have to understand what motivates our individual dog and what they enjoy, because only our dogs get to decide what's a reinforcer. That's a really important thing to remember. Okay, so those are all my tips kind of for today. But definitely, if you haven't seen that workshop video yet, you're going to want to check out that replay, and I'm going to put the description in the link to it in the description of this video when I get done here, so that you can easily find the replay. If you guys have any questions, you can let us know, and we're happy to answer them, of course, inside the Facebook group as well, or here if anybody's here and has a quick question for me. But really, when it comes to food motivation, we want to remember, we're not going to free feed. Make sure our dogs are at a good weight. And make sure that we have some kind of work to eat program going on. And then also that we're always thinking about that teeter-totter, because a lot of times when we have a dog who's got the label not food motivated, what we really just have is an unbalanced teeter-totter. And we have to figure out how to balance it back out for that dog during the training process. All right, well, that is it for today. Let us know if you guys have any questions. And then don't forget, of course, if you are watching this live, or if you're watching the replay anytime in October, that we will be doing part 3 of our focus building workshop tomorrow night, Wednesday, October 23rd at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time inside our Facebook group. And then these workshop videos will be up through October, and then they're going to come down. So let us know if you guys have any questions, and I will see you later. Have a great day.